Thank you so much for joining the StreamGeeks Esports in Education webinar. Today we're talking about how to build an esports lab. And the growth in esports has been incredible. Mobile, console, PC, Asia, North America, everywhere. Video games are growing over the past year, let alone the past couple decades. And so I wrote a book called Esports in Education. And the main philosophy here is that there's good video games, right? And there's great things that come from video gaming and professional competitive video gaming. But there's also a dark side. And what I mean by that is, lack of sleep, bad nutrition, isolation. It is true. And it's something that educators should be thinking about. And bringing esports and video gaming into the education space gives us that opportunity to be good shepherds. So that's why we're here for a lot of reasons. And my next square tells you to join Zoom, which I know a lot of you already have. Sorry for the technical difficulties. You can scan this QR code if you're watching on YouTube and join the Zoom call. And that way you can get into our Q&A. So we've got this great Zoom call going on, and it's going to be great. So I'm challenging Mike to show our little Zoom call, but don't worry, it's fine, Mike. Let's just go to the next square. We had a little bit of a frazzled start. I don't want to push it too hard today. We've got a great giveaway. You can scan the QR code to get into this giveaway. We're giving away 15 live streaming cameras plus 6 chairs from Spectrum Industries. So you must be watching live to claim the prize. So if we call you and you're not here, we're going to skip on to the next person. Okay, Todd Conley, a good friend of mine. He is coming in from Washington, and Todd helped me not only write Esports in Education, but also Todd came to New York City when we needed help live streaming our first esports tournament. We partnered with the Center for Educational Innovation, and Todd really inspired me with what he's doing. So we already played the video, Todd, so I'm going to cut right to you here. Let's pin Todd in the Zoom session. Todd has been really inspirational for me, so we're going to let Todd speak first. He's going to speak for 15 minutes. And then after Todd is going to be Scott Dorn from Spectrum Industries. So thank you both for being here. And then, of course, everyone is going to get a half hour, roughly, maybe 25 minutes for Q&A. So Todd, Scott, Q&A. The Q&A is the most important. We want to hear from you guys about how you're building out esports labs and spaces in your schools so we can learn from you. So let's jump into it. Here we go.
Awesome. Can you see my screen? Am I sharing my slides? Did we get that part working?
Yes, that's working.
Looks good, Todd.
Okay, great. I know I have 15 minutes, but I'm going to try to go quicker. I'm just really here to set the stage today about the basic premise that an esports lab is more than just gaming. So we're heavily involved. We're a career tech student organization. So we're involved in, a lot of you have heard of STEM. Some of you probably haven't heard of CTE, but CTE is above STEM, if you will, on the hierarchy as far as K-12 goes. And I apologize for those in the collegiate space, but yeah, we're mostly focused in the K-12 space. But still a lot of lessons learned there for collegiate. But obviously, everybody knows the need for 21st century skills and all those jobs that are out there that are in demand. And it's not just for gaming itself, but we use gaming as an excuse to get kids into education. So we focus on a couple different career clusters at high school GG, business management administration, finance, marketing, IT, AV, technology, communications, hospitality, tourism, and then all things STEM. What we do is we actually sanction competitions at the state and national level for everything around esports. So while your students are out there competing in the games themselves, we're competing in these different competitive events. We call them career development events. This year in Washington, California, New Jersey, and 15 other states, we've got competitions in everything from producing a show like you're seeing today. So maybe the judges would have downgraded us at the start. All the way up to producing TikTok, jersey design, cybersecurity, PC case design, creative montage. We focus on all sorts of different software out there. So What we're doing is basically providing you something where you can use that computer lab in your school all day, not just after school for the esports, but for Photoshop during the day and all sorts of fun activities. These are the games we support, and I think the key thing here is, we're game agnostic, so we support all the games, all the different consoles and PCs. And what we're trying to get the kids involved with are these different roles that are available within an esports franchise at a school, so that the students learn to be the captains, they learn to be the coaches, and what that means for each particular game. Maybe they're not a gamer themselves, but they want to be involved as a commentator, a caster, sports writers, data analysts. They can be the camera operators. They can be that video editor, learning all sorts of different software there, and it's applicable to career fields well beyond esports. Graphics designers, somebody's got to come up with the logo, take the school logo and esportsify it, put it on some jerseys. Marketing, accounting, programmers, and web designers. So what we do in the various states that we operate, we separate the states into regions, and the schools compete at the local level, then eventually at the district level, and then at the state championship level. So here's our map in Washington State, for example. Everything virtual this year, obviously, and we're looking forward to being in person next year. But when folks come to our events, what we're really doing, we're spending the majority of our time is recruiting industry professionals like yourselves to come and judge these events. So if a student is competing in a Photoshop competition, we want them to get real feedback from industry professionals. Let's see here. I think another important part of this, as your students are going through and working their way through their labs, they're always working towards some sort of certification, an industry certification, whether that's esports specific. The good news is Twitch and the Twitch student program are now working on some esports specific professional certifications, but there's also great certifications available out there from Microsoft, AWS, and CompTIA, and we work on that. So I'll skip over these slides, but feel free to reach out to me if you want to see a lot more of this stuff. But we've got a number of classes that we've identified and actually work and have developed full-blown curriculum that's mapped to a couple of different state standards now for esports. One talking point for all of you all out there, and sometimes I forget about this because we're so involved on a daily basis, but the big thing about a computer lab that separates it from a football stadium is that this computer lab, when done properly, can be used throughout the day. It's not just a resource for after-school esports. It can be used throughout the day for all sorts of different classes, especially now when we see a lot of schools are going towards Chromebooks and really moving away from those typical PCs. And there's just a lot of software and opportunities that are left on the table when you don't have access to those Windows devices. So I think it's really great opportunity here to emphasize that to all of your administrators and the people making the purchase decisions. So this is the bulk of my presentation here, and this is just kind of my thoughts. But have you considered having a PC building workshop? It's a great way to get the students involved and get the students learning how to not only decide on what components are important, but how to purchase those components online and then put those together. It often results in a savings for your district. They can learn about networking through that and everything, local area networking. Other things that are must-haves inside the esports lab, you need some broadcast cameras, and those are cameras separate from the webcams, and I know somebody's going to walk away with some of those today. So looking forward to seeing how you use that in your classroom. Capture cards are another big important part of this that you might forget about when budgeting. So you want capture cards for your consoles, but also for some of those other camera devices. Audio mixers and audio interfaces are important. I underline this because it's my #1 pet peeve. Having multiple monitors. These workstations are not there just for gaming. They're there for productivity and production, and having multiple monitors really makes a difference and gets kids learning how to be a productive IT worker. Another thing that I think is important to note is being able to kind of segment this lab from the typical security policies and lockdown Active Directory environment within your school. So if you've got the ability to request that from your IT department, that's definitely going to help you out, as these students can take all those computers and learn IT things from them. I said consoles. Don't forget about consoles. There's, although gaming PCs can be expensive, you do have $200, $300, $400 console options there that can help you out. As far as getting everyone involved, and we found one of the ways we really got females involved in a lot of our schools was by implementing TikTok competitions and YouTube competitions, where you've set aside a portion of that room where the set is designed for people being able to do those sorts of productions. Also, don't forget about MIDI devices. I know Paul uses a lot of those in making StreamGeeks happen. So those types of devices are important. I talked about microphones. Got to have access to different microphones, and it's not just about getting quality audio. It's about the kids learning how to plug those in and how that all works. Speakers are important too, right? You got to be able to play some sound in the lab. Movable. You want your lab to be movable, because at some point you're gonna take this and move it into the gym or some sort of large group room. So a larger event that's for the whole school can be produced, and ideally produced by the students. You want some lighting. You want to teach lighting fundamentals. And having lighting that's geared for broadcast is important. And that if you could hang that on trusses, that's even better. I've been to a lot of great collegiate setups where they've got trussing involved, but I've even been to a middle school that had some trusses. So that was really cool to see. I think it's important to kind of delineate and note the difference between a gaming system and a system that's used for production and casting. And I know Scott will talk about that and some of the different desk options, but make sure you do realize that there's those 3 use cases there within a lab. You want green screens, don't forget about that. You want it configurable. That's why I love these casters, and I don't mean broadcasters, but casters as in wheels on your desks where you can move it around to different classroom configurations. ADA accessibility, I think, last thing I want to point out, it's very great to have at least a couple desks that are configurable up and down for both standing and sitting access to get everyone going. I'm going to end my slides there and hopefully give some time to Scott. If you need to reach out, just reach out to me, Todd at highschool.gg. Happy to talk to anyone about your gaming setup.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. There'll be an opportunity for Q&A after our speaking sessions today. So feel free to write them in the chat, and I will keep a log of them for when we're ready to give a chance to do a Q&A. And next up, we have Scott Dorn, Spectrum Industries, to present to us today.
Great. Is everybody seeing the screen and the presentation?
Considerations when planning an esports event.
Awesome. And great job, Todd. You covered a lot of content in a very short amount of time. I'll try to do the same, a few more slides, so please be patient with me. I'm going to cover a couple of things Todd touched on, and then we'll get into some examples and how to prepare as you move forward. One of the things that I think is great as we roll into esports as just a fantastic opportunity for schools and for students. When you take a look at the amount of students playing video games right now, whether it's in an organized or an individual setting, it's approaching 90%. When you take a look, based on some data released by High School Esports League, about 80% of the participants in esports, formerly esports, are not involved in other extracurricular activities. And this is a great opportunity to pull those people in and to really build on those elements that make extracurriculars just a fantastic engagement opportunity for students. When you look at the space in particular, and you see what happens, whether it's a baseball or softball field, whether it's a football field, whether it's a volleyball or basketball court, or in non-athletic situations with band, with theater, with drama, what you're seeing is students have a place that they call home. They have their, whether it's Friday Night Lights or whether it's taking the stage, they're building on their relationships with one another. They have a destination. It is really a sense of belonging. And when you look at what Todd touched on, it's also an incredible opportunity for career development, especially in esports. And within esports in particular, you take a look at those career areas That's one of the things that really drew me and drew Spectrum to this. We operate in AV and IT environments for the most part, and those segments have been really challenged over the last couple of years to bring in new and younger talent into those areas. And when you look at esports and what the students can be part of, before they graduate, they can get some real life experience that can be a huge value, whether it's to Todd, whether it's to Paul and Tess, or whether it's to us, or whether it's to the schools that are participating on this call. So I really love that opportunity. And part of where we fit in is, let's take a look at what those goals are and what those areas within your esports program, and let's try to build that out. So be deliberate when you're planning your space. Don't just try to fit as many students as possible into a room and hope it goes well. Let's take a look at what we can do, how we can work together, and really build out something that you can visualize before you jump into it. So a lot of times we'll work with a sketch, we'll move to a 2D to make sure all elements are accommodated. It gives the facility team an opportunity to see from a network, from an electrical standpoint, that everything can be accommodated. And then we'll move into a highly visible, really attractive 3D rendering. Just to give you an example, from a 2D standpoint, it can still be really helpful. You can take a look and identify whether it's a varsity, or a first team type program, or a competitive riser area that you may have that may be a little bit elevated. You may have general gaming stations. You may have a separate meeting area or coaches area, as well as broadcast or console areas. So this really helps us identify how we can accommodate that within the space. When we get there, so when we're talking or when you're considering what to do, there are a couple of elements that I think are really critical. And one is to really make sure that you are measuring and looking at that usable space within your facility. Looking at the dimensions, the swing of the doors, all of those are important. Identifying the protrusions into space, because that can have a direct impact on what your ADA guidelines would require you to do for walkways and for making sure you don't have anything overhead that may be something that could be a hazard to someone with a vision impairment. And then taking a look at where your power and network are going to be. And then, as Todd kind of set the table here, define those uses in that space. So what are you going to have for competition or varsity? What are you going to have for practice? What are you going to have for dedicated console gaming spaces? And I try to differentiate those, because we've seen a lot of schools, just to get started, they may place a PC and a console on the same desk. What you're doing is you're really limiting how often that can be used, and it's really a one or the other, instead of being able to use both spaces at the same time. And then that shoutcasting, broadcasting, streaming station, making sure you've got something that can be dedicated. In talking to Kyle before we kicked off here, there was a conversation on some of the athletics and recording and streaming some of those. What a great environment to bring in some of those athletes, whether they're esports or otherwise, to have a broadcast space where you could recap the game and bring in folks. And the shoutcasting area, I tell you what, the students that can shoutcast are really impressive. And when you look at the next generations, Tony Romo's or Jim Nance's, the action that they're calling via esports is so much more fast-paced than what we're used to on traditional sports. My belief is a lot of those shoutcasters are going to be able to write their own ticket if they want to stay in broadcasting. Additionally, looking at those coaching areas, and then team huddle, lounge, study spaces, those are important when you look at those other elements. So when you're looking at marketing, making sure that you can tie in those other areas in the space, and you're not using too much dual purpose, where at the same time you may be requiring that space. When you're looking at the space overall, trying to get a feel for what handicap requirements may be, we try to ensure that at least 1 or a minimum of 5% of stations are adjustable height, and they can accommodate both from a width and a depth standpoint to accommodate wheelchairs. So looking at those aisles, looking at those walkways, and those strategic placement of where that ADA station may go, So they can very much be part of the action. The inclusionary aspect of esports is second to none. So regardless of whether I have a physical impairity, regardless of my gender, I'm going to be able to compete just like everyone else in that environment. And that's one where when we're planning the environment, we want to make sure all of those athletes have the same access to that technology in those games as everybody else. One of the things that's really cool about this space is going to be the visual elements. So you see I transitioned from a 2D to a 3D rendering. When we feel that we've got everything in place and we need that little extra pop as we're preparing these spaces, we can take what your goals are, what your visuals are, build that out into the rendering so you can actually start to see what the finished product may look like. We're not interior designers, but we do want to help you build at least a rudimentary blueprint. So as you're working with your team, you have something you can start to follow, something that can be at least your intro level area for your room. If you do that right, you can see off to the right what your space could be. And I've got a few slides on that room in particular in a little bit, so you'll be able to see. But that visual element can be huge. So whether it's a concrete wall and you're just doing some painting over the top of it, or whether it's doing some creative graphics that you're going to put over another type of a wall texture, we can try to give you at least a feel for what that space is going to look like. One of the things that we've seen within esports spaces is some of the space that's being provided may have been used for a lot of different purposes. So you may end up with some really unique, whether it's corners, whether it's shapes, or even some confined spaces that might not be usable in a big sense, but we might be able to carve out something like you see here where there's some consoles that are tied into that area. So you can create a couple of console gaming stations in addition to a general access esports area. But then looking at those other areas, so you're creating an environment that makes the students want to come to, much like the band space, much like a theater, much like the locker rooms. There are areas that the athletes and the participants want to go to. They want to spend time there outside of their competitions and really trying to leverage that for the fullest for esports as well. If you think of 80 to 85% of these participants not being in other extracurriculars, they might not have that opportunity to build those peer relationships. And this is a space that, if you define it right, could really be valuable in that sense. And then when you're taking a look from a density standpoint, trying to plan for enough space so you can have enough room to compete, but still allow you to pack in the number of people that your program hopes to add. And it doesn't matter how large or how small. We've got projects that we've worked on that include a nice viewing area, so you could have, whether it's community, whether it's classmates, or whether it's other schools coming in to watch a competition, or whether it's something where it's going to be in a broadcast setting like Army West Point, their esports program, very heavy on the broadcast side of things. They've actually got a couple of showcaster stations, and then they've got 6 competition stations. But you notice even here, they're planning for social distancing, so they're able to accommodate that. But because they are a small, lightweight, mobile, they can be moved together in a different setting when that is needed. And it's interesting, when you take a look at these, you might think this looks like a professional or an entertainment. This is actually a K-12 school district. So this is something that you're looking at, districts and schools of every size. They're really taking a hard look at this and seeing how they can move forward and planning for that entire space. So as you see here, again, it's just another example where you've got some varsity stations here. You can see them here. You've actually got that console gaming area, and then you've got the PC gaming area as well as some lounge space. So you're trying to have a real nice program that can accommodate all those different areas, and it's not just that PC oriented gaming that a lot of people think of. Also planning for that handicap accessibility. So if you've got risers, you don't know if one of those competitors may require that handicap accessibility at some point. So, making sure that you're planning from that standpoint. Also planning, you can see the shoutcast environment. That's actually Amon Green, former NFL player. He actually does shoutcasting on the side. So in addition to being an esports coach at one of the colleges that offers scholarships, he's also out there from a professional standpoint promoting the community. And then you're seeing a lot of different types of programs and a lot of different types of setups overall. And I'll just run through these fairly quickly. It's interesting to see what the rendering looked like compared to the live setting. So this is Army West Point. And then taking a look at some of those graphic elements. So you can plan beforehand, and then when it comes to the final product at the end of the day, you can really see how impressive some of those areas are. And again, here's Arcadia with some of those visual elements. You can see there's enough room for each student at each one of these stations. But again, they're taking every opportunity possible to promote their program. They know, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Twitch, whether it's doing something on YouTube, the visibility of these rooms and the broadcasting that's happening, the streaming that's happening out of these rooms is huge. So take that opportunity to brand your program. It's just like putting a logo on the side of a helmet, on the front of a jersey. You want that to be out there, and take that opportunity, whether it's on a wall or, as we can show here in a little bit, you know, it could be part of the furniture, it could be part of the desks themselves, it could be part of the chairs. And then when Todd mentioned the mobility and the ability to reconfigure those rooms, that is absolutely a huge part of it. We can't forget the social distancing in the current environment we're in. I show this just because it's an example of how one institution is handling it, at least from a temporary standpoint. They're creating that 6 feet spacing by basically taking one of the stations out of order. It's a lot better than not having that area at all. And I'll close just with a quick few examples here. If you're looking for furniture, if you're looking for what do you put into that space, you know, planning for cable management, planning for something that can handle that electrical requirement, that network requirement. You could have a lot of things, whether it's USB cables, whether it's the power cables, whether it's the network, or maybe a camera that you need to connect, the keyboards, the mice, making sure that it's all organized. Keep it really well contained. Don't allow it to turn into a spaghetti factory hanging off the back where, you know, maybe a younger Scott would walk through and with my backpack hook something. I'm not saying I did that, but you know, it is one of those things you need to plan for. And then from a visual standpoint, we can make it as graphic or as plain as you like. And a lot of people can do something similar, but this is one of those things that I really promote, being in sales and marketing my whole life. Keeping your brand in front of everyone is absolutely critical. One of the things that's important is chairs. So I've seen a lot of spaces repurposed. A lot of times you need to just get started, and absolutely a huge proponent for that. When the opportunity does come, make sure you're making good decisions on what you're doing for seating. Make sure it has a rugged weight capacity, can handle a wide group of people. Make sure it's easy to clean, you know, so it's not something that if I spill a Red Bull or I spill some water, it's not going to be easy to clean up. Make sure there's adjustability so you can get to a comfortable gaming height, and then make sure you've got that neck and lumbar support for certain. Those are going to be some critical elements as you roll forward. But even the chairs, as I mentioned before, you can make those branded. We can make those as just visual as you want that space to be. From a shoutcasting or broadcasting standpoint, that's going to be one of the biggest, highest visibility areas. Highly recommend, whether it's attaching a display as you're seeing here, or whether it's just including a logo, making that something that represents what you want your program to be. And then taking a look at from the renderings to actual reality, you can see what a few of those spaces look like. It is just really a fantastic environment. And you know, when Todd was talking about some of the mic and camera elements here, it is absolutely pivotal that you plan for that and create that space. Because of the value and challenge in some of the consoles, so we've heard about the difficulty in getting the new Xbox, whether it's the X or the S, the new PlayStation 5, and the cost that some of that resale is happening at. They're highly valuable, and some of those components or accessories that go with them could be just absolutely inviting to someone who might want to try to walk off with it. One of the things that you might want to look at, whether it's a credenza type solution as shown here on the left, or whether it's a dedicated console environment, having something that you can lock up, having something that you can store those controllers, those headsets, and then possibly even lock. As Todd mentioned, a lot of the the tournaments that may happen, some of the high visibility events that may happen, the ability to make it mobile. That is one of the things that you need to look at. So whether it's a credenza or a cabinet type solution like we're showing here, making sure that you accommodate that, and then not losing sight of those other areas. So whether it's planning strategy, watching game film, having a coaches meeting, looking at how you can incorporate those elements into the area so that it is a cohesive environment. Just like a coach coming into a locker room, laying out the game plan, just like a band director going through what their plans are, they have that dedicated area. Don't ignore the opportunity to prepare and plan for that as well. And then we have prepared a few things, basically tried to do something with a neutral voice from a guidebook standpoint. We are working on a new revision of that that'll be released this summer. We do have a 60-page idea book that goes through some potential areas. And then, as I mentioned, and as Todd mentioned, the ADA, Handicap Accessibility, we do have a space planning guidebook, touches on audio-visual applications as well as classroom. Those are all free resources that you guys are welcome to. And then to help, we do have a free planning service, so we can help walk you through those steps. So if you are interested, that is something that we can assist with. And I will finish and close just by saying, feel free to reach out. We do have a group of 11 people around the country, a couple other that cover broader geographies as well as myself. Love the space, happy to have a discussion, and proud to be part of this conversation today. So I'll finish up with that.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. And so we're going to go right to Q&A. So that's where we're going to head to, a little Q&A session. But before we go to Q&A, and by the way, Tess, are you there listening to the chat and everything?
I am here. I've been keeping an eye on it.
All right. Good to see you. So we're going to go right to Q&A. And I'm going to be right here in front of the Zoom meeting. So I'm excited about that. But let me ask you, Scott, a lot of those what I was seeing there was really exciting. What was the coolest esports lab that you put together so far in your career?
Boy, I tell you what, each one, just because of the excitement that it generates with the students and with the administration and really with the community, once they get indoors, they are all so exciting. I would hate to put one above the other, and each program is different. There is no cookie cutter solution. That would be one thing I would mention to everybody. What you're going to need for technology, how you're going to go about acquiring that, the space that you have, they are all so different. I think getting to where you can have that kind of inspired space that can be a destination is a great long-term goal, but it shouldn't stop you from trying to get started, right? I mean, repurpose product if you have to, share that space, as Todd mentioned, if you have to. But we all know what happened in those other areas, whether it's theater, whether it's band, whether it's athletics. Those lifelong relationships that you make, it could be chess club. Those are people that you trust and people that you want to work with and people that you build relationships with. That's what this is going to facilitate. And I love all of them. So I'm kind of, whipping out and giving you a direct answer. But you can tell there's a couple of them where the visual elements just stand out above others. So, if that's something that they're able to do, that makes a huge difference.
Cool. Well, I just thought I'd ask because it was very inspiring. Let's ask Tess what questions we have to answer. I'm going to put this display on a gallery view here for you, Mike. I know it's kind of mirroring. By the way, Mike and I both got our vaccines, so we're very recently. Mike got his yesterday, so we're feeling a little. We're pushing through, but if cut us a little slack today. But Tess, why don't you give us our questions?
Sure. I'll start with a softball for you guys. We got quite a few requests for a copy of both of your presentations. Is that something that you think that we could share with our audience today?
Yeah, happy.
Yeah.
Tess,
awesome.
Why don't we collect them and put them with the in the follow-up email?
That's what I'm thinking. If you register for today's webinar or giveaway, we can go ahead and send you a follow-up email that includes those presentations. And specifically, people were looking for that PDF idea book from Scott. And I guess if we can get that maybe through the presentation then.
Yeah, I could separately send the link to you. You could actually just include the link right in the follow-up email. That'll make it the easiest. That way they don't have to dig through the presentation. So I'll provide that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for that. We have a question from Kevin, and we do have a full Zoom audience today. So we do invite you, if you wanted to do the raise hand icon within Zoom, we can give you the floor. Kevin says, Scott, in the world of online esports, latency is everything. What are ISPs doing to provide larger okay, now we're getting to the techie stuff for me, 1+ gigabits up and down internet branches to esports areas where that isn't currently accessible?
So I think I'm going to ask that both Todd and Paul and yourself, Tess, also chime in on this. I think when you look at challenges, and I think the COVID environment presented when you were talking about remote participation, broadband and quality of network really became one of the barriers. Also looking at some of the remote areas that might not have access, that's been one of the challenges. So I do know there's been discussions in our region, some of the discussion with Charter. They're one of the largest providers in the area on things that we can do. The state has engaged as well. I think you're seeing a lot of those same discussions happening overall. But I think much like everything else, if you're planning for a streaming environment, you have to plan for that type of bandwidth. So, I think even that conversation that we had with Kyle before this kicked off, that might be one of the things that we might have a few other audience members want to jump in on as well. Todd, Paul?
Yeah, and I'll just say, unfortunately,
sorry.
Unfortunately, broadband today in 2021 is still not considered a utility like gas and water and electricity. So there's, I'm in Washington State where we've got Microsoft and Amazon here, but we still got tracking about 35 out of the 500 high schools that don't have more than 5 megabits of download capacity, let alone upload capacity. So it's still an issue. We're looking at Starlink to solve some of those problems. I've got a couple schools that are using Starlink now effectively. I will say, we don't have control over where fiber runs and all of the government policy, but I would encourage you to talk to your elected officials about competition or lack thereof when it comes to broadband accessibility. I think the other thing to note is a lot of these games do have a local a LAN component to them where you can set up a server inside your school environment, play that, and then move on to a higher level of competition once you've done that locally, if internet really is a factor.
Yeah, I was going to say, Todd, if internet becomes such a problem, consoles obviously can support multiplayer. You can set up a local area network. And honestly, a lot of the things that I read about in my book are done in a local area network, which does not require internet. But yeah, it's a pain in the butt, as you know, Todd. All the new games need to be updated all the time. And they have these big downloaded packages, and you need internet to play a lot of these games. But if the bottleneck is using the cloud or something, then try to play on your local area network, and that should speed things up for you and reduce the latency, right, Todd?
Yeah, definitely. But Kevin's question has struck a chord, so I think we need to do a little more as far as talking with some of these state governments that we're engaged with as far as CTE funding goes to determine what we can really do. But I know broadband has been is listed as a priority for this administration, so I hope that we can get there.
Yeah, me too. Great question.
Yeah, speaking of funding, we've got some conversation happening in the chat about funding. Do you have any tips or experience with how schools can access funding or increase their chances of attaining funding for an esports program?
Sure. So there's a couple different vectors to go with through the schools. I think a lot of schools have tried through the athletic department. I think that works well collegiately, but haven't seen a lot of success for that at the middle school and high school level. That's why we are a firm believer in everything career tech education and the Perkins Act, and we're more than happy to write grants on your behalf for your particular state. We have had success here on the West Coast in California and Washington State, and are currently in talks with some other state legislatures about funding as well. But in general, I think it's important to treat yourself just like any other nonprofit that you're essentially competing for a lot of those dollars, and have some grant writers that can help you out there as the funding is available. And I will say that you need to become kind of a lobbyist. You need to take your kids that are playing these games and go to the state capitol and pit the kids in a game versus the elected officials, whether it's the governor or some state senators or state legislatures, and have them see that experience and what it does for those kids. And once they see that, then they're going to be more willing to put you in legislatively into their budgets.
That's great advice, Todd. Thank you. Bradley is saying, our school, we are in the process of building a computer lab, and we're finding it really difficult to get a hold of video cards. What do you recommend us starting with if video cards aren't easily accessible?
Ooh,
Well,
tough question.
Number one, consoles. Consoles are a great option now when GPUs are hard to come by. But yeah, I've seen a lot of schools go as far as buying pre-built systems from Walmart that might contain, let's say, like a 1070 or a 1660 class of card, and taking those cards out and putting them in other schools. But yeah, it's a tough market when it comes to GPUs right now. Yeah, my GTX 1080 I have is more valuable than my car right now. But yeah, I think that if you look, we just did a computer lab setup for a school. Lenovo quoted them with 1660s. They're not even able to get the 3070s, 3080s into any of these. I think it's also important to note that a lot of these games do not require the latest GPU. So if you have a GTX 1060 or an RX 480, 580, those classes of GPUs are going to work for all of the competitive esports today.
Well, and Todd, let me ask you while we're on that subject, regarding like the cloud. And I know there's lack of broadband, but for those of us that do have good broadband, isn't it possible to use like a Chromebook with like Google Stadia or the Xbox Cloud systems? And I know it's not maybe great for the highest end competitions, but the cloud has come quite a long way, hasn't it?
Sure, yeah. Google Stadia, for whatever reason, doesn't have any licensing specific towards education yet. But I've been reaching out to their team. Would love a good contact there. Hi, Google. But yes, Google Stadia works. There's also NVIDIA GeForce Now. Amazon has a product coming out. It's called Amazon Luna, which is a competitor to those. You can check that out at amazon.com/Luna. So they're in beta testing now. There's also another product whose name escapes me, but I'll link to it in chat as soon as I remember, that gives you full-blown remote desktop access to some cloud-based GPU instances for gaming.
Yeah,
But
I always thought
short
that
answer is yes, we do have people using Stadia.
because then you can just get a Google Chromebook for all the students. The kids can even play with their phones at that point, right? Which is becoming more popular.
Yep, and Jacob just mentioned Shadow. Yes, shadow.tech is another good one.
Even it just depends on the game. I know a lot of people that I've been working with, Todd, like the local YMCA. Like they just might want to just play like Minecraft, with the kids, and they're not going to be getting into the super high-end games. In my mind, if you can't get these graphics cards right now, or you don't have the budget to build it, that shouldn't stop you, because I really do believe you can use really low-end Chromebooks with Wi-Fi and play Minecraft, right?
Yep, definitely. Another angle we took in both Washington and Oregon, and I'm sure there's similar programs all throughout the country is that the states often have IT resources that are off lease, and they're willing to give those away at a significant discount, or in the case of Washington, completely free to schools. So you get these computers that are 3 years old, they don't have a great GPU, and then you're only going out and finding a GPU. So if you go spend $300, $400, $500, even if you're dealing with the scalpers on eBay to get those GPUs, then you still end up with a quality gaming PC. So there's lots of ways to make it happen, but yeah, off the shelf is hard. I would recommend going to some of the gaming specific companies out there that are a little smaller and do have access to gaming labs. Puget Systems is a great company that we recommend, but there's a lot of them out there. Bytespeed does some great things in esports and seems to have inventory.
Cool.
Raj wants to know, how do you handle computer imaging, security logins using local accounts, and game logins for each individual game?
Sure. So I had said in my presentation that I think it's great if you can image these machines separate from the rest of your network. There are softwares that will kind of put your gaming PC into almost like an entertainment center mode that you can go after, and I can, if you shoot me an email, I can go into some of those with you. But I think it's hard if the thing's going to be locked down to the point where you don't have the ability to install things locally with the kids, and it's also kind of it limits some educational options. Yeah, but we do have schools that haven't been able to get around that IT policy, and it's really up to the teacher then to log in and make sure that the software updates and everything else are happening. But you don't want to have a situation where you've got a Wednesday afternoon game set up, and now there's a 4 gigabyte update on a game, and nobody was able to do that the day before because they didn't have those local permissions. So I think segmenting it from the network is really the best way to go there.
Yeah, and that's also ideal, Todd, for video production too, in a lot of ways. And I know that requires some networking knowledge, but if segmenting the esports computers from the main network helps from a management perspective, it certainly will help from a video production perspective too. Right. Sorry, Tess, go ahead.
That's okay. There's a few questions that kind of surround security of using students and students playing games. Oh, I got a crying baby here. Monitoring the chat, the rating of games. How do schools manage that?
So, I mean, we have built, for schools that we work with, we have a Discord bot that essentially logs everything, but also has a lot of tools built in there as far as filtering. And I think one thing that's important is don't allow your kids to embed pictures and videos inside of Discord or any other sort of chat. But we've got contracts with school districts where we're monitoring all of that. I think it's also really presents it's a learning opportunity, where you can use that as an excuse to combat that toxicity that inevitably will happen. So it's a good opportunity to teach to digital citizenship, digital literacy, get these kids realizing that whatever they say online is gonna live with them.
That's a great point, Todd. We also work with a lot of broadcast clubs who are students who are operating cameras and hosting the morning announcement shows. And we found a lot of these broadcast clubs are partnering with the esports clubs to produce some of the, the larger events that they're doing. And one thing that almost all the broadcast clubs do is they have the students sign a waiver that just says, hey, you're going to be on camera, right? You're going to be part of a production. And if the students are playing a public tournament or in a video production environment, you should probably have a standard waiver of some sort. It's joining the club, right? Todd, have you had any experience with that when you join the esports club or the team and there's some type of waiver that's slightly different than your athletics, football waiver?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think making sure your legal bases are covered, but yeah, you do want full photo releases, waivers, especially you need to have kind of a different segment if you start dealing with kids that are under 13 as opposed to over. Also make sure that you've got your parent permission slips. You know, we use online services. There's a bunch out there, HelloSign, DocuSign, etc. Make sure that the parents are involved just like you would for a field trip.
And I think it's also the codes of conduct, you know, I think are absolutely essential. And I think setting that expectation at the outset. So at, you know, the very first meeting, you're laying out what is expected out of each participant, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. You know, you want to eliminate any chance for any sort of toxicity, you know, regardless of whether it's spoken or written. So. But I think that's one thing that this group, this educational community, has done a great job trying to attack.
And I assume the schools moderate which games are permitted to be played in these clubs and organizations.
Yeah, and I saw in the chat there was a question regarding violence or ratings on the games, and I think that comes down to, and I would absolutely, Todd, I would love to hear a little bit more of your perspective on this too, but you know, I think it comes down to what's the temperature within each district, within each school, regarding what's allowed. Some of the FPS or first person shooter games have some of the best teamwork and planning elements associated. You know, so there are some positives that can come out of that, but that can be something where you evolve to that point. You know, they absolutely aren't required. You know, it can be, yeah, I saw Rocket League brought up earlier here. It can be something like Rocket League where you still have to plan, you still have to work together. But you know, I think it comes down to, you know, the school board, the administration, and the school in particular having their comfort level with what's going to happen within that space.
Yeah, and you know, from my perspective, yeah, having been part of high level professional or competitive FPS games, I think there's a lot of value in some of the practices and strategies that go into those games. That being said, you know, that I come from a very blue, you know, liberal state, and we'd had some pushback when it comes to games such as CS:GO or Overwatch or Valorant. But I think once the schools get an opportunity to experience what's involved with that, it's an easier sell. And the way I'd look at it is, we're taking the activities that the kids are already going to be doing at home on their own and putting them in a team-based environment with an educator there and showing the right way to do things, as opposed to letting them you know, do this at home. And we actually find, yeah, we keep track, and the students are playing less of these games, less screen time at home when this is something that they do, you know, after school in a competitive environment.
Great point.
And also, you know, there's no studies that show a correlation to violence related to any of these types of gaming. And there are some questions in chat. Yes, there are manufacturer ratings as far as the different games, and I can send out links to that should you want it. But for the most part, we try to stay away from those titles rated M at the middle school level. That's why I think Rocket League has really found its place in middle school, although it's great in high school and college too. Fun game, very accessible and fan friendly.
Kevin's asking, how do you work with developers to acquire licensing for broadcast?
So with the publishers, each publisher has a different community license that you can look up. With the exception of Riot and League of Legends, there are very few restrictions as far as you being able to broadcast. They want you to broadcast your games, and you're no different than if you're running a YouTube or Twitch channel. But there are limits when it comes to certain dollars of sponsorship. Most of them are about, once you get over a tournament that has more than $10,000 worth of prizes, then you do need to apply for a custom license. But I can send you links to all the different publishers, Epic, Riot, Blizzard. They've all got their own different process, but it's usually just a form that you fill out in order to get to that point once you cross that $10,000 threshold and move from community to more of a professional license.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Your presentations were wonderful, and for hanging out through the Q&A. I think we could do our giveaway, Paul.
Oh, good point. Let's do that. My goodness. All right. We're going to do our giveaway and then answer any questions along the way, because you do need to be here in order to claim your prize. So I'm going to pull the first winner right now. Here we go. Trent Black. Trent Black from Detroit, Michigan.
Trent Black, are you here? I will put names in the chat. Remember, you must be present and claim your prize in the live chat. Prize is.
Someone's going to win 15 live streaming cameras. I think that's right. 14 webcams for the students and a PTZ camera as well. The HUDcam HD 3X camera, which is a great camera for classrooms as well. And then 6 chairs from Spectrum, too. The gaming chairs with the lumbar support. So important, Scott, the lumbar support.
Awesome.
I can't have
a
a chair
no,
without
Trent's
a lumbar
not here.
pillow. Trent's not here. We need to draw again.
Great. We do give you a moment to claim your prize. I know JJ Mustang was bringing that up in the chat. We'll give you a moment because we understand there's some latency. Let's draw our next winner.
All right, Mike Bobbledeck from University of Northern Iowa. Mike, I'm going to type it in because that's a strange name.
Mike Bobbledeck is here.
He's here. Congratulations, Mike. I've got your contact info from Cedar Falls, Iowa.
Is Mike in the Zoom?
Yep. Congratulations, Mike.
Say hi, Mike.
Awesome.
No pressure.
Mike's in the Zoom. I thought that Kyle Gunderman was going to win, for sure. All right, he might not have a camera and a microphone, but he is here. That's the important part. All right, well, thank you so much for taking this time to be with us today, guys. We're going to send the follow-up email with some of these presentations and extra notes. That's it for our show today. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.